boa tarde para todo mundo. Eu já vou começar a falar em inglês, porque, né, afinal, a nossa palestra vai ser toda em inglês aqui com o Ben. Obrigada pela presença de todos. As I mentioned last week, Ben Nelson is the CEO of Minerva. Minerva is a new university in the US, and it has a very innovative project. I don't want to talk much more about it, because otherwise I would spoil all.
You do a better job than I can just sit
You're talking. So he's going to talk about it, and after all, if you guys have questions, please ask. It's a unique opportunity to have Ben here with us, so enjoy. All right.
Thank you. All right, so I will apologize because at any given time, someone is going to be looking at my back. Which is not a great view, I know. So I apologize for that. So I'll try to turn around as much as possible without getting everybody dizzy. So first, thank you so much for having me. It's always great to actually meet the people that we built Minerva for. And that is for those people all around the world who really want more from their lives, more from their education than what they can possibly get in the traditional system. And in fact, we have one student you can mob afterwards, Guilherme, who's sitting right here. He's our first student from Brazil who's going to be in our founding class this September. So the question that most people ask is, how do you build the world's most exclusive university from scratch? Right? How do you actually do something which is at a level above the Ivy League, above the best universities in the world, above Cambridge, above Oxford, with no background, with no history, without hundreds of years of buildings and classrooms? Well, it turns out age is not really a requirement when it comes to doing great things. In fact, when you think about most innovations in almost any other part of your lives, they generally come from new institutions, not ones that have been around forever, right? So for example, when you think about the clothes that you wear, the games that you play, the movies that you see, each one of these things usually comes from entities that didn't exist 10, 20, 30 years ago. And that's because innovation happens when you can start with a clean slate, when you don't get burdened with knowing that you have to do ways or things in certain ways. And so that's our approach to Minerva. Our approach to Minerva was to create a university with the students at the center. So a traditional university will have the faculty at the center. They'll bring professors to one location, and then they'll build everything around the university around the professors to help them do the research, to house their offices, to facilitate them teaching what they want to teach. And what happens when you do that is you wind up getting an environment which is very, very good for the professor, but maybe not as ideal for the student, because the student winds up going through a process that isn't meant to get them to a certain place. It is meant to facilitate the ongoing nature of the institution. At Minerva, we started from the ground up. And we asked ourselves, what is it that we wanted our students to be when they graduate? And then we worked backwards to construct a university that was perfectly designed for that goal. But in order to start, we had to actually be a university. And the way we started was that we became the newest offering in the Claremont University Consortium. The Claremont Colleges in California is the only consortium in American higher education whose mission is to create new innovative programs at the very highest end of undergraduate education in the United States. And so if you look at the last century in the United States, outside of Claremont McKenna and Harvey Mudd,
there hasn't been another example of a new institution of higher education, university or college, that would be considered tier 1 in the United States. Everything has been at a lower level. But the Claremont Consortium was really dedicated to that kind of innovation. The Minerva schools are housed in the newest member of the Claremont Consortium, KGI. KGI has been innovating for 15 years in graduate level education, especially in applied life sciences. They were the first to create a program that actually takes people who have their doctorates and then teaches them what to do with the doctorate, because the system up until then wasn't very good. And today, only 15 years later, there are 300 such programs like the one KGI started across the world. And KGI is the coordinator of all of those programs. The Minerva schools are the first undergraduate offering at KGI. And so even though it is a new concept in education, it actually is providing a degree from an established institution in a very established and respected consortium of schools. In order to bring or to make this concept a reality, sorry, I have to click one more time. All right, advance one more because I think the clicker is not working. Okay. We had to, of course, attract students. And for this initial group of students that Guilherme is a part of, we had initially expected one section of 15 or 16 students or so to go through our curriculum for the very first time. For those few spots, we received almost 2,500 applications. And so we were somewhat overwhelmed with demand, and we actually opened up a second section. And so the founding class now will have almost 30 students, perhaps 30 students in total, that will go through the first year and experience that with us and help us develop it. These students came from 96 different countries, and we didn't spend one penny on advertising. Right? It was purely by word of mouth, meeting people from Minerva or reading about us in the press. And of those students that applied, we accepted under 3% into the Minerva program. Now, when you see acceptance rates at most universities in the United States, the Ivy League or Stanford or what have you, that accept 5, 6, 7%, it actually is not because only 5% of the students are qualified. In fact, quite the opposite. Usually, many more qualified. Harvard will say that 60 to 80% of their applicants are actually qualified for admissions, but they're space constrained. So they reject a lot of qualified students, and they pick which students they want, not because of the individual student per se, but because they want to create a class that has one representative from Brazil and one from New Jersey and one from Wyoming, and they want to make sure that they have that kind of representation. We set an absolute standard for what qualifies as a Minerva student and what doesn't. And so any student from any country in the world who meets our qualifications will be offered admissions. And any student who doesn't won't be. And there isn't really a shade in between. And so when we accepted this very small group of students, it wasn't because we said, well, we have enough students from this location or that play this sport or do this thing. It's because we believe that these individuals have the highest potential to change the world once they get out of Minerva. And that's how we select our students. And many of the students that did not make our qualifications wind up going to a Harvard or a Stanford or other Ivy League universities, because we really look for the very, very, very best of the students that apply to us from all over the world. The program that these students are going through is designed by our group of deans. Stephen Coslin, who is the large picture there on the left, was the Dean of Social Science at Harvard. And when he was Dean of Social Science at Harvard, he actually proposed a change to the curriculum. They got together in a committee with 6 or 7 people and crafted a really innovative general education idea. And they got to agreement, and they wanted to implement it. So they brought it to the Faculty Senate. And what the Faculty Senate did was that they projected the proposal up on the wall using a big projector, and they went through it line by line as a group and took out every reform. So by the end of the process, the curriculum at Harvard looked exactly like it was at the beginning of the process, and nothing changed. And so Stephen was frustrated by that experience. He'd been on the Harvard faculty for more than 30 years. He was offered a very prestigious directorship of the most important social science research institute in the world, the Center for Advanced Studies in Behavioral Science. And he left for Stanford to run that. And 2 years in, that hunger to change the face of higher education never left. And when he met us, he realized that Minerva could finally be a platform to provide the kind of higher education that the brightest people in the world deserve. And so he left Stanford and joined us. He recruited a group of deans that are putting together this very innovative educational program. And these 4 individuals, each one of them has radically different backgrounds, but they each are at the very top of their field. Eric Bonobo, our Dean of Computational Science, not only has a degree in theoretical physics, not only has 150 plus papers in computer science, which is very, very high in that field, but he also has spent the last 15 years creating and launching machine learning companies. And so he understands not just the computational science side, but how to solve big social science problems when you apply algorithmic thinking to them. Dan Levitin, who's our Dean of Arts and Humanities, is actually a scientist. He's the top-selling science author of the last decade. But he also spent years in the music business. He was a vice president at Columbia Records before he was an academic. And so he understands the arts from a scientific perspective, from a business perspective, and from an artistic perspective. And we bring that sensibility to our arts and humanities programs. Diane Halpern was the president of the American Psychological Association. But she also wrote the book on how to teach critical thinking, which is in its 5th edition, the most authoritative book on the subject in the world. And Jim Sterling, who is our interim dean of natural science and is the director of the Minerva Labs, is one of the world's foremost experts on lab automation and actually how to create science research labs that don't require any human intervention to actually work, that you can operate remotely from all over the world. We'll get to why that's important in a minute. This group of individuals put together the Minerva program. And as I said at the beginning, it starts with what we want our students to become. And our goals are to help our students become leaders and innovators in a variety of different fields and in a global context. So we believe that if you're going to do anything meaningful in the future, even if it's within your community, you need to understand how the rest of the world operates. Right? You can say, oh, let me put together a program that'll help the most needy members of my society. But if you train them to get jobs that will be demolished 5 years from now because of advancements that are happening in Vietnam, you need to know that. And you need to know how the world will evolve to adapt. So even if you want to act in a very local perspective, to understand how the rest of the world works is critical, no matter what field you're going to be in, and no matter if you're going to be a creator of the institution you will lead or a leader of an existing one. In order to do that, they went to the literatures and looked at what are the common characteristics of successful leaders and innovators in all of these different fields. And they looked at innovators in business, in politics, in the arts, in music, right? Going all the way back to the great composers and thinking about what distinguished those individuals. And turns out they could distill into 3 major areas. And many universities will say that they teach you these areas: how to think creatively, how to think critically, how to communicate effectively. But the problem is that when you actually look at their curriculum, and you say, well, that sounds great. I want to learn how to do those things. Where do you teach me that? right? If I go to University X, where in the curriculum does that actually occur? I'll say, well, you can take a history course or an English course or a chemistry class, and you pick up that other stuff by accident. That's not a very good educational plan. I mean, I don't think here the goal of the school is for you to teach you by accident, right? When you go to a school, it should be programmatic. And so what they did was they then took these 3 buckets and broke them into 90-some different components that we characterize either habits of mind or foundational concepts. And what these mean are these are components of your education that are generative, that you're going to be building on top of as you go through not just the Minerva curriculum, but for the rest of your lives. So for example, if you want to think critically, right, about something, you want to invent something and introduce it into a new system, you want to help that neighborhood of poor students, you can't just think about what you'll introduce to that neighborhood and what its immediate effects will be. You have to think about the second and third order effects. You have to think about what are the ramifications of your actions. How will they interact with what other people are doing in that same neighborhood? You have to think through complex systems. So that is a habit of mind, thinking about what will happen down the line. And what we do is in the first year of our curriculum, we actually teach you these 90-some habits of mind and foundational concepts. And we do that by introducing you to all of the academic disciplines that you'll be able to choose from after you get out of your freshman year into the sophomore year and onwards. And then for the remaining 3 years of your education at Minerva, you take what you learn in your foundation year and you exercise it. So as you choose your direction, the major, as you then choose your focus, your concentration, as you synthesize all of that together and create something novel through our capstone project, right? In every step of the way, you will exercise how to apply critical thinking, creative thinking, and effective communication to everything you do. More than a quarter of your grade point average is going to be based on how you apply those skills throughout your 4 years. Okay? The beauty of it is that this program, which has never been done in American higher education, actually fits within all of the requirements of an accredited degree that is recognized all over the world. And so we've taken an established structure and we've created content and a program that fits within it. Now, from a student life perspective, that we needed to create an experience that complements the formal education. And one thing which is critical from our perspective to train these future leaders and innovators is to get them exposed and understanding of how the world works. And so rather than building a very big castle and putting all of you in that castle, locking you inside for 4 years and saying, talk amongst yourselves, and then we'll release you into the world to run the joint, right? Which is what universities generally do now. We don't think that's very healthy for the world. We think much better is to get you integrated to the way the world actually works. And so all of our students will spend their first year in San Francisco, and then they'll break into groups of 150 students, and they'll live in 6 different cities around the world over the next 6 semesters. And in each one of these cities, they'll have a residence hall. That is our residence hall in San Francisco. It's not just a pretty picture of a cable car. And they will have to go into the city for anything they want. So much like you guys have here these 2 restaurants across the street for your eating pleasures, in San Francisco, the goal is not for us to create your cafeteria. It's for you to actually go into the city and figure out where to eat, right? It's rather than giving you a clunky old gym with a broken exercise bike and a treadmill that's kind of wobbly. We say you should go to a gym. There are 100 gyms in the city. You choose which one you become a member of. Rather than putting together 5 paintings that nobody wants and erecting a museum and have you pay for its maintenance, we say we're going to be in the cities with the greatest museums in the world. Go and explore them. And in each one of those elements, to integrate you into the city, we have these co-curricular programs that introduce you and get you behind the scenes with the great cultural, political, and economic figures of those cities and of those and of those countries, where you can learn how today's leaders and innovators are successful and what problems they are struggling with. We want to have pairings of cities that also tell a different story. And so, for example, in our first year after San Francisco, the students will spend 1 semester in Buenos Aires and 1 semester in Berlin. Now, why these 2 cities? Buenos Aires and Berlin present a very interesting contrast, tale of contrasts. 100 years ago, 1914, Argentina was a larger economy than Germany, more successful. Buenos Aires was a more important city than Berlin. In the intervening 100 years, right, Buenos Aires was generally at peace. There were no bombings of the city. There were no invading armies sweeping through Buenos Aires back and forth. Berlin went through that twice. The second time, it was completely destroyed, wiped off the face of the map. A big pile of rubble. Today, Berlin is home to the most effective government in all of continental Europe, the most important economy of Europe. It is one of the world's primary cultural centers, and it is the innovation and technology hub for the entire European continent. Buenos Aires is very much like it was 100 years ago. Why is that? What happened? What are the institutions that have allowed Berlin to be where it is today and that have kept Buenos Aires where it was then? These are the kinds of questions, these are the kinds of explorations that our students will figure out firsthand. Right? And as we rotate through the junior year, the senior year, they'll have similar pairings of cities where they can expand their horizons and really understand how the world works. Now, in order to deliver that kind of experience, we had to create a learning environment that would facilitate not just moving from country to country, but also the scaffolded curriculum, one where you study your freshman year and then repeat those concepts over and over, year after year. Now, if we were to do it like we're doing it here, lectures, you would learn nothing. This is about the most un-Minerva-like experience you'll ever have. A guy standing up and telling you things. That doesn't actually happen at Minerva. Lectures are banned. But even classes where you have 15, 16, 17 people around a table with a professor, the problem with that format is what happens in that class stays in the class, right? They teach you something. Maybe one of you learns, maybe one of you doesn't, maybe the others kind of get it. And then you go away and you go to your other class, right? And when you have that model, the only way to educate is to do it course by course. One course can't relate to another because one professor, one teacher, has no idea what you learned in your other class. You can't build. At best, you can build a little bit by subject matter. You took introductory level this, and then you take intermediate, then you take advanced. We hope you get it along the way. We can't afford to allow our students to experience that poor education. It's too important for us to make sure that our students actually connect the dots from class to class. And so in order to do that, we have 2 design principles in our courses. Number 1, we will never offer a class that has more than 20 students in the class. All of our classes are small format. So we'll never have a gathering of this size in a formal class structure. The second is that we deliver all of our courses via a technology platform. And that is because everything you say in class, and you will all have to participate in every single class during the semester, everything you say in class is then graded. And those grades aren't just how you do with the subject matter, but they have to do with how you apply what you learned your freshman year. And so if you're struggling with one concept in your biology class in the morning, your philosophy professor in the afternoon will know that you had difficulties with it. And they'll be able to continue the thread in a completely different subject, but with the same habit of mind that you need to apply from discipline to discipline. What I'm going to show you now is what a Minerva classroom looks like. And this is effectively a glimpse into the future of education. So enjoy. And I narrated a little bit. The first thing you'll see is actually the inside of our dorm in San Francisco. That's not the dorm, the next scene. That is. We designed the platform to allow for a simulation of the most natural environments for the, in the real world. And so we incorporated responsive gesture control, where you can control what happens in the screen just by moving your hands. The interactive discussions are all about live back and forth. Students raise their hands. They can even type their answers ahead of time so the professor knows who to call on. When we do polling, we not only get results, but we actually group people visually in how they believe, and it can move from one camp to another. When we do real-time simulations, we don't hide the professor away. We actually use all of the real estate so people can work collaboratively on documents. Even when people are debating, we keep the rest of the students engaged by having them rate how everybody else is doing, which is shown on the bottom. When you work on your own device, whether it's an iPad or another laptop, it can be directly ported into the main class for everybody to see. And when you have group projects, you can go from the main class to a group instantaneously. Work on documents together, professor can come in and out. And then as you develop individually, the professor can go back to what happened in class and give you specific pointers on what you did well and what you didn't. Not leaving to memory or chance what happened, but actually going to the primary evidence. And so when we think about creating a curriculum that really is extraordinary, we have to design every aspect of the environment. And that is effectively why Guilherme and his colleagues are coming to Minerva. And these students, these individuals, are going to be people who will shape your collective future. They're going to go through a program that will teach them how to think, that will teach them how to create. They're going to see the world, and they're going to work with each other for real positive change. And we hope that for those individuals here that this appeals to, that we'll see you at Minerva as well. So I want to see if you have any questions, if I can answer anything. I'll open it up for questions.
I'd like to know what are the main courses at Minerva. You mentioned arts, you mentioned psychology.
Yeah. So we have 5 major areas of study. And within each major area of study, we have 4 different concentrations, so 20 programs in total. The 5 major areas of study are very standard: business, computational science, natural science, social science, arts and humanities. But it's actually the concentration which is the real innovation in our model. So for example, in arts and humanities, every university will offer history, philosophy, English, and art history. We don't offer any of them, right? Because when have you met somebody and said, hey, what do you do? And they say, oh, I do English. Right? That doesn't make any sense, right? You don't do English. You don't do history. But they provide you important tools that you can apply. So at Minerva, instead of having a history concentration, we have a historical trend analysis concentration. That example I gave between Berlin and Buenos Aires, when one of you is mayor of Sao Paulo in the future, you'll need to understand how you're going to set Sao Paulo on the right course versus the wrong course. And if you don't understand how history is unfolded, you won't be able to make those decisions. Instead of English, we're actually going to offer a multimodal rhetoric course. So you'll know how to be as the most persuasive you can be, whether you're giving a talk in front of 300 people, whether you're talking to somebody one-on-one, whether you're writing an op-ed column, whether you are giving a presentation with visuals, or you use music. Right? Rather than art history, we'll offer concentration in arts and commerce. So it's important to understand how art has evolved over time. But if you just look at it from its role as a critique on society, what you don't understand is how do you actually disseminate the art? How do you actually get people to see what it is that you've created or one of the artists that you represent has created? So if you're going to run a gallery or a museum or a large art festival, you need to understand the art market, right? And we explore both elements. Right? So these are examples of what we offer. So in each one of our majors, we have 4 concentrations which break down the traditional barriers in disciplinarity. And they are both more theoretical, meaning we understand the underpinnings of those disciplines and how they interact with one another, and more applicable. So you actually understand how you apply that theory to the real world and do something important. All of our concentrations are on our website. And so you can see them and not only dive into the concentrations, but actually into the courses that make them up as well. I couldn't have possibly left you with no other questions. This is a very complex idea. Come on. Yeah. Well, one of you has questions. That's good.
What about double majors and things like that?
Yeah.
Majors, minors.
Right.
Can I go into every center or every major aspect I want? For example, I want to perform engineer and music. Right. Engineering and music, or do I have to keep in one center?
No. So actually, the way the curriculum is designed is it is very hospitable to double concentrations and double majors. So double concentrations meaning 2 different concentrations within the same major. Every concentration within a major has 3 courses in common, and then you pick 5 courses for your concentration, and then you have 4 courses for your capstone. Between the 2 concentrations in the same major, you've got 7 of the 12 courses in common. So it's just 5 additional courses for a double concentration. If you want to do a double major, what will happen is we'll ask you to integrate your capstone project across both majors. So if you're interested in engineering and music, then we would want your capstone to cover both fields, which then basically means you can double major for an extra 8 courses. And you have that flexibility within the curriculum.
That's great.
How do we choose our students? That's a very good question. So we look at our students and evaluate them across 3 primary areas. Right? The first one is we look at your grades. Sorry to break the news to you. So you actually have to pay attention to what happens here. You have to do well in school. And for us, it is important that you demonstrate a few years of concentration and being able to excel in a structured learning environment. So, in that way, we're quite traditional. And the second area that we look at is we look at what you've done outside of school. We look at demonstrated areas of leadership, initiative, and/or creativity. And we really want you to put your best foot forward and tell us what is it that you are proud of that you've done on your own, that you've taken initiative and accomplished. The third bucket is we have our own set of assessments. So we have our own tests that we administer, and we'll put you through a structured interview. And we look at the totality of those 3 buckets to figure out who's right for Minerva. Across all 3 of these things, what we're specifically looking for are spikes. Now, what does a spike mean? So if you look at most successful people in the world, the people that are, that I talked about, that we modeled the whole educational process on, turns out they're not good at everything, right? They're pretty good at most things, but they're extraordinary in one thing. They have a spike, right? And so what we look for are people who have demonstrated the ability to really excel in one area of their coursework, in one type of accomplishment or one category of accomplishments that blow us away in one aspect of their assessments. Now, they can't be terrible at everything else; they have to be good at everything else, but they really just excel at something, and we really are very interested in those spiky kids. Yes, if you're perfect at everything across the board and have absolutely no flaws, you'll also be considered. But we much prefer the spike.
Is there an SAT or something?
No. Very important. So we have our own assessments, but we don't look at SATs and we don't have you write essays, at least not when you're not on camera. We will have you write something when you're on camera, but you won't know what it's about. But the reason that we don't do essays and we don't do SATs is because those two criterion highly favor the rich. So if you look at same IQ individuals that take SATs and just look at their income distribution, there's a 200-point differential between top quintile and bottom quintile in same IQ, their performance of the SAT. Same thing with essays. Guess why? Because the rich pay to be trained to hack the tests. They pay someone to write the essay for them, right? Because they're not on camera, right? Like, how does Harvard know that you actually wrote the essay that you wrote? They don't. And so what happens is most universities will say that they're need blind, right? They'll say, oh, we're open access to everybody. It's just not true because they weight their application process to weed out those people who are not at the very top economic brackets. And that's not our philosophy. So we're trying to have a completely level playing field as much as we can for all of our applicants. And so we don't do anything that'll pre-bias towards one end of the socioeconomic spectrum versus another.
Do you have to pay to study in Minerva?
Yes, yes. And it's free. No, it's not free at all. So the way Minerva works from a cost perspective, good question, is the residential part is the same as it is in any other university. So you have to pay for your housing, you have to eat, so whatever it'll cost you to eat in wherever cities you go to, you have to have health insurance, you have to have books, right? So all of the things that a standard university charges, we have to charge for because those are hard costs. Our tuition, however, which now at the Ivy League is $40,000 to $45,000 a year, at Minerva the tuition is $10,000. So for 1 year of tuition at a traditional Ivy League university, you've paid for all of your tuition at Minerva across all 4 years. And the reason for that is because if you look at what makes up those tuition dollars at universities, there are 4 things that have caused huge inflation in the cost of American higher education. Tenure, right, where you pay a lot of money to professors not to work. Not a good idea. We don't do that. College athletics, right, which cost $10,000 per student per year, whether or not you're an athlete or not. We don't do that. We highly encourage you to play a sport. There are a lot of public parks and requires you buying a ball, like $20. Kicking it around works. So we don't do that. The funding of faculty research by undergraduates, which happens at all of these universities. You pay a lot of money, not for the professor's time to teach you, but your professor's time to teach you and to do research and for lab costs and things like that. And at Minerva, you only pay for the portion of the professor's income which is related to you getting taught. And lastly, what is known as the amenities race. Harvard needs to have a better climbing wall than Stanford, and Stanford needs to have a better theater than Yale, and Yale needs to have a nicer student center than Princeton. and Princeton needs to have a nicer statue than Penn, which they do, and we don't do any of that. Because what we do is we put you in the world's greatest cities and say, guess what? What these cities have is better than anything a university can recreate. So why charge you for amenities that are worse than what exists in the real world, as opposed to giving you the best the world has to offer for free? And so that's how you do it. That's how you raise the quality of education. You have a better experience, and you do it for a fraction of the costs. But it's not free.
Will it require TOEFL or IELTS tests?
Yeah, so one thing we do require is we do, if you're not a native English speaker, we have to know that you have sufficient English, and so evidence of English, whether it be a TOEFL or if you have, maybe you're not a native English speaker, but you've grown up and spent 5 years in the U.S. or what have you. So TOEFL is the easiest one, and then you can petition to show us that you know English in other ways.
Well, continue what he said. Do Cambridge exams apply?
I think Cambridge also applies. Does Cambridge apply? I forget. TOEFL.
Yeah.
It's mostly TOEFL.
Or evidence of speaking English fluently.
Yeah.
By residing abroad.
Yeah. Maybe if the Cambridge is equivalent, so the reason we screen for that is if your English isn't up to par, you will get destroyed in the curriculum. So it's a for your own good kind of thing, right? So make sure you have good English.
Does Minerva offer some financial aid?
Yes. So on top of the general lower cost for everybody, we offer financial aid, which is need-based. We admit completely need-blind. We have no idea who your parents are when you apply. We don't ask, and we have no idea what your economic status is. So the admissions decision is purely based on merit, and then your financial aid is purely based on need. And so we offer a combination of, there are some scholarships, thanks to some generous donors, but those are not very many because obviously we're very early. But there's a lot of opportunities for work study, right? So you can be an RA, or you could work with Minerva, with the professors, or what have you. And we're arranging for low-interest student loans for students from all over the world, as well as encouraging you to work with local foundations like Estudar and others to get scholarships for Minerva.
Having a Minerva degree, when I'm looking for works with something,
Yes.
if I understood right, you're looking for someone that will build something new, not just apply for a regular job. And
it's okay to work a little bit before you build something. It's okay.
yeah, I know, but you're aiming for something that will have initiative, not going by a big company and build yourself in it, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it really is up to the student. Many people have different paths to innovation. It's not, most great institutions weren't started by 21-year-olds, right? Sometimes you need to get a little bit of experience before you go out and forge on your own, though you can do it in either way. The Minerva degree is not only designed to make you successful in building your own thing, it's meant to position you in a much better way for employment if you choose to go that route. So not only is the degree the most selective in the world, not only do you get an education which is unparalleled and more practical, and not only do you have this capstone where you actually operate at a professional level your last 2 years at Minerva before you go into the real world, but unlike a traditional university, Minerva will actively help manage your career. And so when you are interested in working at a startup or in a large company or working on a nonprofit, you will have access to all of our networks. And when I say our networks, I don't just mean myself, which is a substantial network, and I don't just mean the deans, but I mean people like Bob Carey, who is in charge of our institute. Bob Carey is an individual who ran for the presidency of the United States of America. And every Minerva student will know Bob Carey. Every Minerva student will know our investors, which are the most powerful venture firm in all of Silicon Valley. So the network that you create, not just among one another, but the active participation of Minerva in your career will give you a, let's call it an unfair competitive advantage compared to other graduates.
I have a question here. So
Yeah.
calendar-wise, how is that set?
The calendar. So the Minerva school year is broken into 4-month chunks. So we want to, so our freshman year, so it's 4-year degree, 2 semesters per year. We start in September, we end in December for the first year, for the first semester, fall semester, and then the spring semester starts in January, ends in April. So that means from May to August, you have off. And we expect you to do something with that, right? So you have 4 months, right? And it doesn't mean you get to go home and relax, right? It means we want you out there in the real world doing meaningful work, getting real experience, right? And doing something big, right? So it's a big difference between having a 4 months off and 2.5 months, right? Very big difference. As far as the application process, which I guess I should talk about as well, one of the things that we offer that I think is particularly nice for Southern Hemisphere applicants, which is you guys, is we have 4 application periods. And our application periods are early decision, early action, regular decision, and waitlist. So at Minerva, you don't get on the wait list by not being as good as your other classmates. You get on your wait list by applying late. So generally, not a good idea to apply late, so better to apply early. Now, the early decision period is probably the most different between Minerva and other institutions. Early decision is meant for those of you who know Minerva is it. This is what I want. If I get in, I'm going, no question. Our early decision period starts now, actually started last week, and it goes until the end of the summer. If you apply an early decision during the summer, we will tell you whether or not you're in at Minerva before the Ivy League's deadline for early decision applications for them. So if you don't get into Minerva, it's a costless issue because you can apply early decision to any university in the United States. If you do, you don't have to fill out an application for anyone. So it's an easy process for those of you who absolutely know this is the right thing. For those of you who don't, you should then do early action or regular decision. And that's a more traditional timeline. And the wait list is for those applying after January. Yes, yes. All the applications are online. You'll fill out the application. We will then ask you to give us a little bit of additional information to help us process your application once it's submitted. We'll then invite you to take some of these assessment tests. And then, assuming you get through that process, we'll invite finalists to interview. And then you'll know.
And when do the students hear from you?
So if you apply early decision, you will hear from us by the beginning of October, right? October 1st, which gives you 2 weeks to do applications to other places in case you didn't get in. If you apply early action, you'll hear from us December 1st or 15th, something around then. And if you apply regular, you hear in mid-March or beginning of April, like the typical universities.
Yeah, like the online classes, we have a schedule, like we have to be on time.
Yes.
11 o'clock, we enter in the site and
Yes.
everybody's going.
Right. You're on a schedule. You actually have to follow a schedule. I apologize because it's all live. So you can't. It's very hard for you to have a debate if nobody else shows up. So no, easy to win it, right? But yes. So and you will take your first year. You take 4 classes a semester, right? So if these are 4 full-year courses, in your sophomore year, you will take 3 courses per semester because you're expected to learn a lot on your own, in your own time. We don't do any of the introductory level courses. We expect you to learn that on by yourselves or with fellow students, but not you don't have to pay us money for it. And then in your junior and senior year, you take 3 formal classes per semester, and you have your capstone project in parallel. So when you have 4 courses, each course meets for about 3 hours per week. So you have 2 1-hour, 10-minute sessions with the professors per course, and 1 50-minute session that's only students and student-led, where you actually teach one another. So if you take 4 courses, it's roughly 12 hours of school a week. Very difficult. Monday to Thursday. There's no class Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Once again, not so you can goof off.
What happens if you fail to attend a class? Can it be recovered, like rewatched?
So we record all of the courses. And you are allowed, I think, 1 or 2 missed classes per semester, per course. And if you miss more, your grade will suffer because you're graded on your participation. But you can always go back, and you can actually go back to classes you've even attended for studying and things like that and see what happened and access it.
Does this quota for missed classes also apply to, for example, sickness?
Yes, generally, but because you can actually come to class generally when you're sick, right? Because you can do it from bed, and you can be even in audio-only mode if you really are embarrassed by the way you look that day.
So there's no excuse. You're half dead. You're going to class.
If you're 3/4 dead, you can miss classes. So half dead, you can still make it.
Okay.
How about accreditation?
Yes. So we are. So the Minerva School of Arts and Science is fully accredited by WASC, which is the accreditor that accredits Stanford and Caltech and Pomona and others. Our School of Business, which is the 5th major, we will apply for accreditation in the fall and expect to have it by winter. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. I hope this was interesting at the very least. And we look forward to meeting some of you over the course of the coming year. Thank you.
So, thanks everyone for coming. I hope you had a great time. If you had more questions, Professor Olavo is here. I think you have a lot of work to do during this coming year. As you can see, it's a very innovative college, university, completely different from everything you have in the US and even more here in Brazil. So it was very important for us here in Bandeirantes to bring that experience to show what is happening in the world for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.